What's up, guys? I'm here with Dr. AVM. He is someone that I've recently started playing with, and he's even more versed into the Halo universe than I am. So I thought I'd ask him about what he thinks about the new Halo game. All right, what do you have to say, AVM?
Hi everybody. I'm not a real doctor. Just gonna get that out of the way right now. But no, yeah, I have been playing Halo since Halo CE as a tiny little kid. Um, yeah, have read every book, played every game, went to every midnight release that I was allowed to at least, and here I am. To put Infinite into a frame, it is the first Halo game that I did not get on release. I waited a little bit. So yeah, I'm just happy to be here to discuss it with someone else who is just as passionate about Halo. So thanks.
Yes, I am very passionate. I wish I had your knowledge of it, but maybe here here in a bit in a few books down the road. Okay, so we were going to be going over some points that we felt were really good about the game, and then some that were not so good, and then we'll wrap up with our final thoughts on the good and bad. Uh, so I guess we're just going to jump straight into the first points that are the positive points. The first one we wanted to talk about was just the art of music.
Oh,
So I feel like that was, yeah, it's great.
right in
It's
there.
wonderful. Yeah. So it's beautiful. It's what we needed after Halo 5. I felt like it needed a refresh. Uh, and it just seems clean. And oh my gosh, I was playing the campaign and some of the music came on and it was just like straight out of Halo 2 and I was so happy about it.
Yeah, I, I
So,
I can't I cannot agree more. I definitely think it was more of a return to form than a refresh. But yeah, and like
mhm.
when they first released oh, I forget what it was called, but that armor trailer, like I think last year or 2 years ago, whenever it was, and they showed like yeah they were returning to the art style. That was such a big moment because I mean for people who didn't really like the art style of 4 and 5, I'm sure can agree. It was like wow, finally they're conceding on this point of just giving us the original art style because that's what we've come to know, it's what we've come to love, it's what we wanted. So seeing it in the game in a modern title is really nice, especially after all of the very wild and varying designs we saw um, in 4 and mostly 5. So yeah, very very thankful for that, and the music too. Oh gosh, oh
Yeah.
chills.
Oh, yeah, I know. It was just, oh. I think they started playing like a variant of Peril from Halo 2, and I was like, because that's like my song. I love that song. So yeah, to comment on the art, like I played a lot of Halo Reach. It's my most played Halo game when it comes to multiplayer, and it was just like so refreshing to see them bring that back. I really, really loved it. I know for some of the newer players that, they can appreciate all forms of armor that they've put out. But it just, for me, I really enjoyed that, yeah, like back to form that they've really tried to push. Any last points on this particular point?
Yeah, I mean to not to shit on that, but like the Halo 4 and Halo 5, I think what really uh kind of soured it for me, at least, is that it really felt like they were Power Rangers and not Spartans. And it
Yeah,
was like,
yeah.
don't get me wrong, some of those armors are pretty fucking cool. I'm not gonna, get on a high horse or anything, but it felt out of place, I guess, is the best way to describe
Mm-hmm.
it. So being someone that has I can't even tell you how many fucking times I've played Halo 1. I hope we can swear, but um
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, you're good, you're good.
um but yeah, just it's like leaving your hometown for like a decade and then coming home and being like, wow, this was home. This is what I needed. This is what I missed. So it was
Yeah.
such a refreshing thing to see the armor come back in such a way, and not I mean even to take it a step further, not just the armor. I feel like they've done a really good job artistically in recapturing a lot of the elements that made the older games very special. Like I know a lot of people are the Forerunner doors. Like come on, like such a small attention to detail, but something very very much appreciated for sure.
Yeah, no, definitely. Like I I enjoyed Halo 4's story, but when it came to the armors, I just felt like I like it. The armors were cool and they were fun, but Halo, even though it's set in the future, is still like has that realistic art
Yeah.
style, something that's plausible, you know. And I feel like they brought that back. Um, so moving on to the campaign, what are your thoughts on the campaign?
Well, speaking of really quickly Halo 4's art style, the only thing that I can really recall is the gap that they put in Cortana's teeth for absolutely no
Okay.
reason.
Oh my gosh.
But anyway,
Dude, okay. 100%. Halo 2 anniversary Cortana
oh,
all the
so
way.
hot.
All
Oh
right.
my god, I would do anything for her. Oh, I would activate the rings for Halo 2 Cortana. So fucking sassy.
Oh
Oh my
my gosh.
god.
No, I'm right there with you. Best Cortana right there. Oh. Okay, go.
Oh yeah, Jen Taylor absolutely killed it, and good segue into the
Mhm.
campaign for Infinite as well.
Yeah.
It's it at first it was kind of a mixed bag for
Mhm.
me. I was kind of really I felt like I was going to be unimpressed. I really didn't think it was going to be able to offer me anything, and as I progressed through it, um, it was getting better, but then it finally became a positive experience for me once I remembered that the whole point of Infinite's campaign was to be a spiritual reboot to the franchise.
Mhm.
So once I kind of wrapped my head around that, the story began making more sense to me, at least from a creative decision standpoint, I guess, because it's basically it at least what I feel it sets out to do and what it does very well is it tells a very specific story to build a platform while at the same time, thankfully, really kind of shutting the door on Halo 5 and kind of which quick side note is a huge fucking feat given the hole that they put themselves into narratively at the end of that game and everything that happened after. Um, but overall, I think they did a really good job narratively, at least again considering what they had to work with Halo 5.
Mhm.
If you were to look at the campaign in a vacuum, I would say it's a very basic, very flat story, but considering all of the fan service, and I won't do any spoilers, but like the just the small attention to details, like certain music cues, certain callbacks to the
Mhm.
previous games, with the fan service and the art style, and again keeping in mind that this was a spiritual reboot to try to reset the kind of crazy plot points that have come up in the past 20 years. It was really well done, and I will say that I'm very happy with the campaign from a narrative standpoint. I'll put it that way. Um, because they told a decent story, and again, you compare that to Halo 5 story. This is the best story that's ever been told.
Yeah.
But they did a really decent job, really kind of righting the ship, and I think that they are now headed in the right direction. And without giving any spoilers, I think a really cool thing that they did was they've kind of set it, or at least positioned it in a way where plot points from Halo 5 and even plot points from like the Point of Light book, or not to get too deep into the lore because I will easily do that.
Same.
Um, Other plot points from Halo 5 or a couple of the other recent books that have come out in the past year or so, they're in a position where they can still easily now incorporate those plot threads into Halo Infinite story going forward, but they can also, or they're also positioned to turn around and say, no, that plot point is dead, or for a lack of a better way of explaining it. So they've really positioned themselves in a very good way to take this forward.
Yeah, kind of allow them to be a little bit more congruent with all of the current lore, which it wasn't congruent pretty much at all with Halo 5, so that makes me happy the fact that they're really taking that step forward. Uh, Another thing is I wanted to talk about all of the really yeah, is the callbacks. The little things that
Oh,
the grunts would say or the brutes would say, they would basically be like one-liners from previous games, but they'd slightly twist it to make it something new and fun and refreshing. And then so you're like, oh wait, I've heard that before, or just like fun little like small things that you can find that just are so enjoyable. And again, yeah, like you were saying, refreshing. So just to add that on.
yeah.
And then the last positive point we're going to be talking about is the multiplayer and its potential. Go for it.
Okay. Um, so from a positive standpoint, and I will be honest with everyone, this one's a little bit harder to to tackle from a fair point of view. But I will say positively about the multiplayer. The sentiment is kind of the same with the campaign. I definitely feel like they have, or 343 has made decisions in the right direction that kind of can speak to maybe a better intent with what they want to do with the multiplayer and what they're trying to do with the multiplayer. Um, but the execution and a couple of other things considered, which I'm sure we'll get into in the negatives, kind of overshadow the goodwill that they've managed to really try to build with the current decisions that they've made or different decisions. But to be more specific, I think that the multiplayer feels nice. It has a lot of potential. It looks stunning. Um, but there are a lot of issues that are really holding it back. And I of course I know that it's a completely subjective topic. Um, because people like different things. But for me personally, as someone who has played the absolute fucking shit out of every Halo game that has ever come out, save for two, hot take, two was not my favorite multiplayer. Um, I I can't really pour myself into Infinite's multiplayer. I've tried. I played it when I played every flight. I played it when it dropped early on November 15th, and I just find myself even when and I mean we're usually and you're there. We're usually winning the games, but even when we win, it's something about it. And I think it's a culmination of a bunch of smaller points or smaller problems. It just ends up not really being satisfying or fulfilling. Like there are funny moments because who you're playing with, we can make it fun, but it's missing that satisfaction at points.
Mm-hmm.
And again, we'll get into that in the negatives, but I've put I don't know maybe 20 30 hours into it, which and I didn't even like Halo 5 that much, but I played Halo 5 for 5 years, and I had fun doing it, even though I didn't appreciate it or I didn't recognize it so much as a Halo multiplayer, given the mechanic choices for it. I still played it because it was a fun game. I did get satisfaction out of it. So I feel like Infinite is pretty much like a chocolate chip cookie, a really good fucking cookie, but it's missing the chocolate. Like there's something about it um, that just it doesn't jive well, and I feel like that's going to be a transition into the
Yeah,
negatives
like
after you say your positives.
it has the potential to have that same like just fluster feeling at the end of the match that it gives you. Either you're just super pissed about, oh man, like I just sucked that game, or oh my gosh, that was incredible. If I win or lose, I don't get that feeling either side.
Yeah,
But like it has the potential for that to change, you know. There is a lot of good aspects of it, and there's just things that need to be changed for that to reach the full potential. But it has potential. That is the positive point. Moving into the negative point, we'll just go straight into multiplayer, and then we'll go into campaign a little bit after, just so that we stay kind of, on the same topic. So we are officially
that's where the bulk of our conversation will
we
be. Yeah.
are officially on the negative points of the multiplayer. So I think the first one we're going to be talking about is the battle pass. Go for it, ABM.
Okay. Like many others, I will say that I was incredibly excited when they first mentioned it, and you can call me naive, you can say whatever, but when it became apparent that Halo Infinite was going to be free to play and there was going to be a battle pass, my first reaction was ill. But then when they came out and they were like, well, we're going to do things different. The battle pass is never going to expire. There's going to be no FOMO. It's not going to be a job for you to grind through it. These were great things because that right off or right out of the gate really gave Infinite a leg up on the competition because those are things that people, whether they know it or not, they will appreciate. Not having to grind or treat the game that you're playing like a job. So I quickly warmed up to the free-to-play idea. I thought it was going to be really well, and based on what we were seeing and what we were hearing, um, you know, day one, millions of customizations. It was very, very exciting, and I will 100% say I had very, very high expectations. Um, but through the flights, I mean, we all saw what was going on. There were a lot of restrictions, and with the battle pass, and the frustrating part is because I mean, a lot of people I've seen, I was one of them, um, gave that feedback during the flight, saying, "Hey, like the battle pass, we love that it's not going to expire. We know that the content has to last 3 months, or yeah, originally it was 3 months was the season length. So we get not being able to blaze through it, but just the fact that you can only really progress through the battle pass by like just by challenges was not something that's welcomed, and I mean it's still not welcomed, and um, even it it fractures off into two arguments, right? So there's the one argument of cosmetics don't affect the game, therefore it is not pay to win, therefore it does not matter. And then the other argument is that even though cosmetics don't affect the game, it fundamentally changes how people are playing the game. And it's hard to tie them together, but I think that the easiest way that I've felt to explain it is that even if you don't care about cosmetics, which I get, right? Because some people just want to play, even if it's not something that bothers you, it is going to bother that other half of the player base that do care about cosmetics, right? And I mean, we've seen it, right? How many games have you gone into where half your team quits because this isn't the map or the game type they need for a challenge? Something like that. So by spoiling the experience for this part of the player base, it is spoiling the overall experience for everyone.
Yeah,
Um,
I agree.
so yeah, the battle pass overall. I mean, again, now that I've seen it in action, I'm back to where I was originally with my ew reaction. I don't like the free to play model, but at the same time, I can understand from their perspective that this is where the industry is now. This is there's a lot more money in free to play for companies, but I just I think the thing that bothers me about it, even though I'm trying to be understanding, is that and I can make this argument about Halo 4 and Halo 5, and people are gonna fucking boo me, but 343 is notorious for trend chasing. So I mean, we saw it in Halo 4 with the COD stuff. We saw it in Halo 5 with the enhanced mobility and the loot boxes. And in Infinite, they're trying to do this free to play, which again, understanding that's where the industry is, but it's frustrating because if you look around at the other games that are doing free to play, they've already established tried and true methods where it's a fair balance between free to play versus consumer friendly. And I feel like 343 kind of jumped on the trend a little bit late. And they looked around and looked at Fortnite, for example, and said, hey, Fortnite charges $20 per skin. We can do the same thing. But didn't look at the history of what Fortnite had to go through before it was able to build that player base that was willing to
Yeah,
pay
because they're like name
$20.
brand now, basically. Like most of the Halo player base wants to spend money either in like the books, the merchandise, like that you can actually wear or have in your house, like statues. Like that's at least from my standpoint. They don't want to sit there and pay for all of these cosmetic changes or just trying to get their original Spartans from other games. Like I'm trying to get my Halo Reach Spartan and the EOD isn't even available yet. So I'm kind of bummed about that and I'm terrified that it's going to come out in some $20 pack and I'm going to have to buy it.
That's a real fear, and I feel I echo that as well. And to kind of add to that too, I mean, you can chalk it up to greed. You can chalk it up to Microsoft being the publisher and driving these, profit expectations or goals that 343 has to meet. But the bottom line is, again, we'll stick with Fortnite as the example. Fortnite in the beginning struggled with their setup, right? It took a while for them to kind of get their footing and say, okay, well, we're really going to drive the gameplay experience, and then once we have people really enjoying the game and we get that dedicated audience, then we can start rolling out, the battle pass and cosmetics that people will pay for. And if they pay for it, they pay for it. They can earn that premium currency through playing the game. They figured out by trial and error how to get to that good free to play model. And it feels like, at least, everyone's going to view it's a subjective opinion, that 343 saw the success of what Fortnite is doing nowadays and said, yeah, I want that, but without having to put in the groundwork to actually earn that kind of relationship with their fan base. And I mean, you can speculate whatever the reason behind that is. Again, corporate greed. My personal opinion is that whether it was someone at Microsoft or maybe someone at 343, but I think somebody at some point had the idea of, well, this is Halo. It's been a franchise for 20 years. We don't need to put that work in. We already have a successful franchise, so we can do this. We can reap these rewards without actually having to, sweat a little bit, break our backs, and really kind of earn that trust and that feeling of, yes, I feel like this is a fair system from us as the consumers.
Even though Halo 4 didn't have the best multiplayer reputation and Halo 5 didn't have the best campaign reputation, they still have that base of not only what Bungie built, but what 343 themselves have built. They just don't have that reputation for having to pay for cosmetics. It's always come, with the bundle of the $60 game and the multiplayer, and that's what players expect. They're not coming into this expecting that they have to pay $20 for a small cosmetic piece. So I think just that's a really big leap for them, and they need to ease into that rather than just push for it immediately. I think they really need to build that trust with us as the consumer and their fan base because, we're just not expecting that type of transaction to go throughout. We are expecting, hey, we just have this game. It's always been that way. We bought it. Why don't we have this customization that we normally have? So they should start off slow and work their way into it if they're wanting to have that expectation of these transactions.
Yeah, and that is such a good way to look at it because I think it's not, and the objective or the goal is to never vilify, like the developers or anyone who, because I'm sure they worked hard. I'm sure that whether it was driven by leadership or whatever, I think it's a very fair point to say that over 343's track record, they have had a lot of major fumbles, and because of that, they have alienated or lost a lot of fans, and at the same time, maybe even gained new fans, right? So I agree that Halo 4, I'll stay away from my opinions on the campaigns of both games because those are two separate discussions, but from a multiplayer perspective, I didn't mind Halo 4's multiplayer. I didn't like how egregious the trend chasing was, but I
Yeah, I
still
still
played it.
liked it and I
Yeah,
still
I
played
still
it.
had a good time playing it. And to me, it still felt relatively in the same realm of a Halo multiplayer. It still felt like a Halo game, albeit with a lot of stuff added on top of it, which you can make the same argument about Reach. But Halo 4 to me felt like a Halo game. Halo 5 then came out, and I played the beta for that, and I was like, this is awful. This is nothing like a Halo game. This just doesn't feel right. And I remember playing the beta with a couple of my friends, and I came to the conclusion of, because I wanted to keep playing it. I wasn't happy about it, but I wanted to keep playing. So that tells you something. Like, you have something special there. If people literally can't stop playing it because it's that good. Um, so in my brain, I came to the conclusion of, okay, this doesn't feel like Halo. It barely looks like Halo, but I will acknowledge that this is a fun game to play. It's different. It's not the same as Halo that I'm used to, but it is fun mechanically. Halo Infinite, and I think that this is the part that makes it so off-putting and why I struggled a little bit saying the positives, is that it's so close you can almost taste it to being close to what Halo multiplayer is. And a lot of the people that I see defending it, I think that they see that too. They see that, yes, and the reason why it's getting so much praise in regards to multiplayer is that it is closer to true Halo multiplayer than what has come before. And I 100% agree with that, and I agree with you in the sense of, it would have made a more positive experience for us as consumers if 343 really used the first, we'll say quarter of their game being released to really kind of establish and rebuild that goodwill, and then start introducing, like, not egregious, but fair to microtransactions. You can't even call them microtransactions at this point. Um, but then start playing around with, okay, well, what can we do in the store? What can we charge people? Stuff like that. But for them to come out of the gate and the only thing that is completely bugless and not broken is the shop is quite frankly insulting. And I've seen it. I mean, if you've seen it too, whether it's on the forums or not, but a lot of people are putting their tinfoil hats on and saying, yeah, man, this is just a store with a Halo game slapped around it because it feels like everything was created with the store in mind. Like the store is the central pillar and everything else is being supported by that. And that's not, you can't really do that without having a good foundation, which I agree with you that they really kind of broke over the past few games.
Yeah, I mean, I still enjoyed Halo 4 and Halo 5's multiplayer, just for different reasons. Like Halo 5 was fast-paced, it was fun. It didn't really feel like a Halo game, but it was definitely fun to play. Halo 4 was just more of a social fun aspect. They had really good forge maps. And they tried. Like a lot of people hated on them because it wasn't competitive. They didn't have D-scope and all that stuff like that. But I still enjoyed it for what it was. To make one last point about the cosmetics, I do think that what you wear in game is super important because you go into a match and it just changes the atmosphere. You're like, oh yeah, check out my armor, especially with this new, I don't know what it's called, like the pre-game screen where you see the Spartans. You're like, oh, look at how awesome I look. It just adds to the atmosphere and the enjoyment of the game, and it just is not like that anymore. With this new monetization, it just takes away from that. And instead of easing into it, they just laid it on really thick.
Yeah, like way too thick, and saying it out loud too really makes you think about how like during the flights that was the feedback that people gave them. They said, "Hey man, this isn't great. We don't really like this. Can we maybe take a look at this?" And this will lead into the next point I want to make too, but it's almost it's not almost it is it's quite frankly very disappointing that that feedback along with other or a lot of feedback honestly was it just fell on deaf ears. Like it was never addressed, it was never brought up. It was like they were very choosy with what feedback they were willing to respond to or even acknowledge. And in regards to the monetization, there's another point that I think we should touch on too, or not the monetization, the customization. And this is a sentiment I share too, but I kind of fall in between this and the camp of their cosmetics. It's not really that big of a deal. Um, but all of the Halos before were complete packages. You paid, the retail price of the game, and you had all of these customization options. They were never locked to the extent that they are now. Um, and so with that in mind, again, you have to make exceptions because it's free to play now. But I feel like what they could have done is, for example, and we'll refer to the armor cores just to make it a really easy to illustrate example, right? If they would have did something along the lines of like, hey, everybody gets the Mark 7 core right out of the gate. Everything that can be unlocked for the Mark 7 core is through playing the game. So whether it be campaign or like accommodations, something like that. And then the seasonal content or the battle pass content that would be for particular cores. So just like we got Heroes of Reach, boom, you'll unlock the Mark 5 core, and all of the unlockable content in there is for that specific armor core. Because then, as a player, you basically you get more control over your own money because you can say, hey, maybe I wasn't a fan of Reach and I don't really care about the Mark 5 battle core and the Reach armor. I really like the M7, so I'm not going to buy this battle pass because there's nothing really in it for me. I really like the Mark 7. But by them doing it this way, and this kind of gets into also discussing the core restriction and the redundancy of certain content or certain unlockables, and the inflation of the fucking challenge swaps, but that's a different conversation. Um, it's almost again, it really and it's hard not to see where these conspiratorial people are coming from, but it really does feel like they went out of their way to make it as difficult and as frustrating as possible to get people to spend the money. So and to tie that back to my example, if you bought the battle pass like I did, and you really like the Reach Armor, you want to unlock Reach Armor. What does unlocking a visor that's only good for the Mark 7 core? What does that do for me? Nothing. Why would I unlock a helmet for the M7 core at tier 91 or 83, whatever absurd number it is, if I bought the battle pass because I wanted the Mark 5 core? It just doesn't make sense, because then what this kind of prefaces is that in the future this is going to keep happening. The next battle pass, will make up a core. Let's say it's the fucking Dick Balls core, and they're going to put content for the Reach Armor core, the Mark 5 one in there. It's like, well, great. I didn't want to buy this battle pass because I don't really care about this armor, but because it has armor for the armor core I do like, now I have to buy this battle pass because I want it. So it feels kind of scummy, honestly. And again, we can't say that that's for sure what's happening. We don't know what is happening. But I can see where these people who have these conspiracies are coming from. It really certainly feels that these decisions were made without players, or that player first pillar in mind. Um, and to your point about like actually like what they could actually monetize, I think, and I've seen this a couple of places. I don't know what the general consensus is, but I think it would have been really, really good for them to obviously not restrict armor and colors to cores and not duplicate cores. That's scummy. I mean, if you're gonna, it's one thing to charge for the color blue, which is also already shitty. But then it's another thing to say, oh, hey, if you just unlock this new armor core, you got to buy blue again if you want to keep using the color blue for this new armor core. That's absolutely dog shit. And it is what it is. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that just really, I don't know, it just grinds my gears. I'm trying to be gentle about it, but that's just absurd.
Yeah. And I mean, it's not too late for them to fix this, but I think what an opportunity they really missed out on in terms of being fair to the players as well as being able to monetize content is, you know, give players colors. I'm like, just give us basic colors. If you really are hell bent on the palette system for texture reasons, fine, just give it to people. Give us the basics and let us unlock armor through the game, through the battle pass, and then just monetize shit that people like. Just, that hasn't been there. Like if they had custom stances, or if when they eventually do add assassinations back in, which I guarantee you they're going to monetize, um, like that shit, I would pay money for,
They
because like
should monetize stuff worth
yeah,
monetizing, not colors that have
yeah,
already been there.
not stuff that's been in the game for 20 years. Like I would,
Yeah, like that stuff should be the
yeah,
things that
or
are going in the
like
battle pass.
give everybody the basics like colors, maybe a couple of sets of armor. In the battle pass, we pay the $10 for. Make that just armor. Like you just unlock armor through playing the game. But then in the store, that's where you put all of that side flashy, like crazy shit. Like different textures of the colors, different patterns, like charms, stuff like that. Because these are things that like you can make the argument, well, yeah, a charm wasn't in any of the Halo games before, so it makes sense that and prices aside, I'll throw a number out just to ballpark, but it'd be like, yeah, I'll pay $2 for a fucking reach charm on my gun. I think that's cool. I'm okay with paying $2 for that. That's fine. But to sit there with a straight face and tell me that I have to pay for the color blue? No. Just no. I'm absolutely, or $20 for the color white? No. And then I'm a quick side tangent, and just for the people who for some reason do defend that practice, um specifically regarding the color white one. Uh for the people that say, "Oh, well, it's a bundle. It has other things in it." You do realize that these are not physical assets. These are just computer made assets that, yes, they did take time to create, it did take someone's effort, but for you to sit there and say, hey, here's a set of shoulder pads, it's $8 for this shoulder pad and $8 for this shoulder pad, and we're going to sell them to you separately, that's crazy. Imagine if you went to the store and you wanted to buy a loaf of bread and you got to the checkout and the cashier says, okay, so you have a loaf of bread, it's going to be 25 cents per piece of bread. So you can take some of them or you can pay for the whole thing. That's
I'd rather be able to buy things separately than in a bundle because then I get to choose what I want. It's like going to a store and asking for bread, and they're like, oh, you have to buy eggs and milk also, even though you already have eggs and milk and you just want the bread. if they want to do bundles like that, they should offer a discount. They're like, okay, well, you can buy these things separately, or you could buy this whole bundle for 20% off or something, kind of like they did
Yeah,
with the
and
rec system in Halo
it's one
5.
thing. It's one thing if they say, "Hey, for $1 extra, we'll throw in the eggs and stuff." But it's another thing to say, "Hey, we're gonna charge you for the bread and the eggs and the other stuff. The only way you can buy the bread is if you also pay full price for all the other stuff." It gets very frustrating very quick, and like, and again, I try not to tinfoil hat because it's not fair to the development team. It's not fair to make assumptions about what people's intent are because we can't really prove that. We can only make points to suggest. But when you take stuff like that into consideration and you take like the restrictive cores, you take the absurd shop prices, you take into consideration the leaks about how like the original battle pass had more content, but they cut more of it to put in the store because they saw, or for instance, my favorite example, or at least I would say the most damning example, is how originally the original armor set was to include the Mark 7 helmet. That was the default helmet. And when they released that art or that trailer and they gave it to everybody in MCC for free and they saw the positive response that that armor design got, they said, "Okay, well, fuck that. That's not the default armor anymore. That's going to go into the store and people are going to pay for that."
Yeah,
So,
because people were so excited to see
ex-
that because it's an armor they love. They're like, oh,
exactly.
actually, no,
Yeah.
we're
And
going to
then
make money off
and
that.
like you can even take it a step further. And I don't know, I don't think this is true, but another example, and this one's a very nefarious one, is the esports skins, right? So the argument, or one of the arguments, or conspiracies rather, I guess is a more appropriate way to label it, is that they gave you that HCS Pepsi skin, or the Pepsi Man one, which I think is hilarious that people have started calling it that. They gave you that one for free, and with that one you can change your armor, right? Like the color gets applied to whatever armor you're wearing. So a reasonable person would make the assumption, oh, okay, so if I buy a skin, I'm basically getting that color, or that armor color, armor plate, whatever it's called, armor palette. There we go, color palette. But and that will apply to whatever armor I'm wearing. So, you buy it, and it turns out no, that's not the case. You can't change the armor. If you want to wear those colors, you need to wear that armor. It's not explained anywhere. It's not a disclaimer saying, hey, these armors cannot be configured or customized. But the one that they give you for free is customizable. So it's like it's almost as if they like omitted that bit of information to get people to say, well, I really like this orange one. I'm going to buy it, thinking they can customize it, and then they can't. So it's, again, I mean, that's a really really dark example. If I mean, dude, if that is the case, if that is something that they did, shame on them. Um, but yeah, again, we really can't speak to the
I
intent.
am going to move onto the topic of the progression system. I know we've already been talking about the progression system, but I wanted to dive solely into that and not just like the
Yeah.
customization. Oh, and I also want to bring up the playlists and the game types. Yeah, I know. It's kind of infuriating the fact that the store has more customization than the game types and playlists. Yeah, that kind of makes me angry. And just to wrap up the whole store situation, hey guys, I'm adding this after I recorded this. I know this has been changed, but I feel like we still make some valid points when it comes to the excuses they made because they just didn't want to allow that, and it just raises some questions. Thank you.
Yeah, and so to I mean, and this one I kind of like, a lot of my points to this actually fall under the same umbrella, so I can kind of explain them all together. But in regards to the challenge system specifically, uh, so many problems there. It's really hard to pick a place to start. But what I will say is that these problems were brought to light during the flights, which is, it just adds to the frustration. I think that that's where a lot of people feel frustration, is because we saw this coming. Um, Immediately people realize that, hey, if you make progression solely tied to challenges, it's going to affect the way people approach games, because whether we like it or not, customization does matter to people. So these people who really do want to progress, or maybe it's just the progression, people like achieving that next level, or they really want to unlock that certain armor. It changes the way they play, which it affects the quality of the matches in the match made games. We saw that coming. We knew it was going to happen. And now you can see that the game is plagued with people quitting constantly, people leaving games, people not playing to actually win because there's
Yeah,
also no
people just don't
incentive.
play to win. They just play to get their challenges done, whether it's a gun, game type, map, whatever they need.
Yeah, and I mean
And if
to
they don't have those things in that specific map, they just
exactly.
leave.
Yeah, and it's even it's compounded by the fact that even if you do win, you don't really everybody gets the same amount of XP after. There's no performance based XP.
This system doesn't allow for people to actually strive to be good at the game when it comes to the progression system. And instead of just being like, oh, if I am good at this game and I, end well and get the XP for that, I might be able to make maybe half of the XP that I would with the challenges, but I should just stick it out because I might as well, right? But you can't
Yeah.
do that in this new type. It's just ridiculous.
Well, and exactly, and then that's even further compounded by the timed events because then people are pressured to play those challenges because they
Yeah,
expire.
like the whole
So
Fiesta challenge to get
yeah,
that
and
really cool armor, like that samurai
it's
armor. I'm
it's
not even going to try to pronounce it, but it's just ridiculous. And they don't even announce it, so you don't even know how to prepare for it.
yeah, it's 100% a terrible system, and there are so many different levels of frustration because on a higher level, or let's say a more um, relationship level between consumer and company, it flies in the face of all of those speeches, all of those posts, all of those inside updates that we got leading up to the release of like, yeah, our three pillars are player first and this and that, but it's not though. It's really not, and it's a shame.
I feel like they changed their mind last minute. Like they went in with all the good intentions, and then some CEO said, "Oh, we need to make more money off this," and they were like, "Okay, well, player
Yeah,
not
and
first, I
it's
guess."
and this is only one, and this is why again it was so hard for me to pick positives about the multiplayer, but it's just a small part of a much larger issue, right? So essentially the challenge system, if we were to put it in one sentence, it affects match quality because people are not really playing to win because there's no incentive to win. Um, if you're a challenge person, you want to just excel or you want to unlock armor, you're really focused on your challenges. That's really the way to progress. And I will say that since they've added that new credit or experience system that for the first 6 matches a day you get more experience or whatever or more points, that is 100% a band-aid, and they know that, and they've admitted that there is a much larger fix coming into place. But what it feels like, and again, tinfoil hat, is that they basically needed to find a way to make the progression either take as long as possible in their eyes. I would imagine, again, I don't want to speak for them, but if I were to put myself in their shoes, the only justification I can see is making the progression such a grind and tying it to very specific and RNG challenges was to say, okay, well, it'll keep engagement. It'll keep people playing because they want to finish the challenges so they progress, and it's going to take them a long time to complete the challenges because they're so RNG and complicated. Um, on the worst light of that, it was, or the darker argument is, let's make it as frustrating as possible so we can sell challenge swaps and level skips. So again, tinfoil
And this is
hat.
especially true since half of the battle pass is challenge swaps. Like what are they thinking?
It's classic create a problem and then sell you the solution. And it's again, we can't say that that's for sure what has happened. If it is, shame on them. Um, but it certainly does not feel very player first.
I mean, in Halo MCC, Halo 5, Halo 4, like all of the games that they've done, they've had this feature where you can pick your playlist. And even with MCC, that was like the golden thing. You could pick
Yeah,
specifically
and
each type of playlist on each different type of Halo. It was amazing. And I just don't understand this whole lump sum idea
yeah,
of forcing you to play all these random maps or game types that you don't really want to play. Like it just doesn't. I don't understand who thought that that might be a good idea. This is especially concerning since they act like they only had a couple months to throw together this multiplayer, and they had years. Like this was postponed a long
I
time.
I think a couple of things on that. So the firstly, I think tinfoil hat. It's the same reasoning that the progression is borked, right? It's make because think of it. If we could pick our game types, we could progress through our challenges probably a lot quicker. Therefore, we wouldn't get frustrated. We wouldn't maybe buy challenge swaps, or maybe we wouldn't be engaged as long because we're burning through our progression so fast.
I
Um,
think maybe another theory could be the fact that it takes so long to find certain game types. Like we could see this on MCC, like 10-minute wait times for some games. And so maybe they're just trying to make it so every person could try each game type and see if they like it and enjoy it.
See, and now you're getting into solution territory. So, uh, to get to that point, let's put it this way. So, MCC, and hopefully people know this, or maybe they don't, but MCC was subcontracted out by 343. 343, um, I'm sure they had involvement in the project. They probably had a team also working on the project, but they had two other studios involved with to get to where MCC is today. Because we can't forget, as much as people would like to, when MCC launched, it was a dumpster fire. It just was not good.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
there's barely
it,
anyone
it
playing. The player drop off was
Yeah, because
astronomical at
you
launch.
couldn't play it. The population died incredibly fast because of how broken it was. Um, but it's in a really really good place now. That's what I still play. Um, but I think that the player argument, personally, and feel free to disagree, I don't think it holds water. I don't accept that as a reason, and here's why, right? The first point is that this is a brand new Halo game. It's first brand new Halo game in 6 years. You were not going to have a low population. It's simply not. It was never even a question if Halo Infinite was going to pop off or not, because you have the old fans, you have the younger generation coming in, the free to play kids that find it interesting, people who are like, yeah, I'll give it a try because it's free, and of course the hype around it. There was never a question that Halo Infinite was not going to have a high player base at the start. Um, the diff and trying to compare, or at least make an argument against, the MCC composer, or being able to select your game types like Joe Staten did, is that you're comparing games from 20 years ago and their population with a brand new Halo game. And it's you can't and the age part isn't even the problem, because the classic titles are timeless. They're still just as fun today as they were 20 years ago. It's also the fact that 343 is pretending, like most people, or a lot of people try to, that MCC didn't suck ass when it first came out. So you have a 20-year-old game that for 4 years was essentially not playable, and has finally recovered after 4 years of hell, all with the relaunch of Reach on PC, and I think it was 2019. So, of course, I think the player base averages between 7K to 10K, at least on PC anyway. So that's not even considering the Xbox people and the Game Pass people. But it's not fair to say, oh well, MCC people have to wait for games. It's like, well, yeah, it's an old game, and a lot of the audience got turned off because for 4 years it just wasn't a
Yeah,
functional
the
game.
game's reputation was already broken. People didn't want to return to it.
Exactly, yeah, and first impressions matter. So I think that, and that gets into the territory of, did 343 actually learn any lessons from their previous game releases? Um,
I don't know. It kind of feels like they haven't learned their lesson, especially because they subcontracted MCC out. They kind of just gave up. They're like, it's not my problem anymore. I don't even want to think about it. And they didn't have to go through the tedious work of fixing the game and building that game back up to where it is
yeah, I
today.
think that they saw the good work that it was Splash Studios and Ruffian Games, I think, were the two studios involved. Um, they see the success that those people brought to MCC, and they're like, okay, that restored us some good faith. Now we're going to take that and use that to sell Infinite. Which, I mean, I will say, in my personal experience, it did not work. I went back to MCC. I played the game for a couple of days. I really tried. It tapered off too. Like, at first I would play for a couple hours. I played a lot during the flights because of course you can make the excuse of, it's a flight. Of course it's going to be buggy. Um, but it just, after November 15th, I played it a couple more times, and just ultimately I went back to MCC. It's a much more satisfying experience. And I swear to God, I'm not saying that from a place of bias where, like, oh, Bungie did it better. It's just, it's a more satisfactory game to play. It's not a matter of, oh, I'm not good at Infinite, or oh, Infinite's different and it's not what I'm used to, or I don't like it because it's not Bungie, or something like that.
I mean, since we're on the fact of playability and enjoyability, I'm not that good at MCC. Yeah,
You
I
have
mean,
your
I have
games.
my moments, but most of the time go negative. But just the other day, I went 22 and 3 on Halo Infinite, but I didn't have fun. Even when I'm losing in Halo MCC, I'm still having fun, and that's why I keep going back to it. Like, after that game on Halo Infinite, I literally jumped back on MCC. It honestly just feels like something's missing. It doesn't feel enjoyable or rewarding or just fun. I don't know. That's just my personal opinion, though.
Yeah, and I that's an important thing to highlight too, is that even when you're losing an MCC, you're still having it's still a good experience. It's not like and to kind of frame that, and instead of just kind of trying to make it like some kind of feeling based thing. Um, think of netcode, for example, right? So a big complaint with Infinite is that people feel like they're ghost melees, they're dying around corners, stuff like that. When you die from stuff like that, it's very frustrating because it's not a matter of that player was better than me. It's that this game is not very optimized. Whereas in MCC, if you die, it's like, oh, he got me. It is what it is, you know?
Speaking of that, during the alpha flight test, I was getting shot through walls, grenades were phasing through walls, and like I had footage that I sent into 343 being like, "Hey, like this is an issue. You should probably fix that." And then during the beta, when they released it early, it was still having that issues, but I was trying to give it the benefit of the doubt and thinking, okay, it's still the beta, it's not full release yet, but I'm still having that happen, and I keep sending them feedback proving that this is happening with footage, and they aren't even considering that. And I just, maybe they're overworked, I get it, but it's still something, the core aspect of the game, that is broken, and that's something that you can't just ignore.
Yeah. So and to kind of round that off too, I think that going back to the sentiment of first impressions do matter. With that in mind, that a lot of this feedback was given, and it really feels like they not only didn't really put a lot of attention to the areas that were major, and that's subjective. But me personally, the thing that bothers me the most is just the non-acknowledgement of these problems. So, I know that this is a topic on our list as well, but the player collision, for instance, um, to say that it was a split thing, but it really wasn't, but even just to not even mention the issues with the netcode, or issues with the core, the base of the game. Um,
Just to touch on it, for those of you who don't understand what he means by split feedback, 343 came out and said that it was 50-50. But in reality, the overwhelming majority said that they did not like the lack of player collision, so they just lied about it.
yeah, it essentially, and we'll dive into it when we get there, but it created more problems than it solved. And that's like quite a few head scratching decisions that were actually made in regards to the multiplayer mechanics, but we'll talk about that later. So onto the input based matchmaking. So yeah, so this is another very hot topic within the community, and so for instance, to put into context, for MCC, I play crossplay. I play on PC. I use a controller. I played on Xbox my whole life. Um, but I don't mind playing against keyboard and mouse players. Uh, and when it comes to the input-based matchmaking, I 100% agree with the people who are calling out for it, because I know that not everybody is okay with that, because in basically the simplest way to put it is that controller and keyboard will never be equal. It's insane to think that that will ever happen. Each of them excel in their own different ways. They're two different inputs for a reason. They both have their pros. They both have their cons. Um, so rather than try to develop or to tweak the two inputs to make them on a more even playing field, I think the better solution here, and I get this is my opinion, is to give player choice. If you don't mind playing cross-play on input, do it. That's fine. If you're getting your ass kicked by keyboard and
They
mouse
should
players,
still allow that option for the players.
exactly. And then if you are someone like, whether you're, and again, no, I don't lean one way or the other, whether you're a keyboard or mouse or controller. if you want to experience the game and only play against people who are on an even playing field with you in terms of what gear they're using, you should have that choice. It's because ultimately what you're doing is you're forcing people to play on an inconsistent platform. Not and again, not just saying, oh well, one is obviously better than the other, but it's not even. Whether you're a really good keyboard and mouse player or you're a really good controller player. So it's really baffling that they would have that in MCC to give people that choice to say, yeah, I only want to play with controller players or I only want to play with keyboard and mouse players, but they don't have it here.
The thing is they've had this complaint since day one. People can argue that it fragments the player base or whatever, but this is a new Halo game, and it's a Halo game that is, free to play, so there's going to be that demographic. It's also been years since a Halo has been released, so, people that have been interested in Halo for years are really excited that it's out, and so you're just getting all this mix of people, which allows for a huge, huge player base. So I don't think that's a viable excuse because there's that's not going to affect the games whatsoever and how many people are actually playing.
Yeah, and I agree. And the whole again coming back to the fragmenting the player base, and this actually applies to the previous discussion we had too, is that they definitely wasted an opportunity, like in regards to the playlists, to get player data because at launch that's the highest player count you're going to have, and they could have said, okay, well, how many keyboard mouse players do we have? How many controller players do we have? And same thing with the playlist. They could have said, okay, what are our most popular playlists? What are our least popular playlists? Um, and found a way to give everybody everything essentially. And to illustrate with the playlist, it's probably easier. But for instance, let's say Slayer is completely dominating the objective playlist if they were separated. Completely dominating. People are taking way too long to get into objective for whatever reason. You could make a playlist of quick play that has everything and it prioritizes basically. And then that way, us as the
Kind of
players,
like a mixed bag of
yeah,
nuts.
but we get the choice is the great part, right? So if I really want to play Slayer, well, okay, I'm going to have to wait maybe an extra minute or two to find my match, but at least I'm playing what I want. If I'm someone who's impatient and I just want to get into a match right fucking now, I'll play quick play and I accept that, okay, maybe I'll get capture the flag, maybe I'll get Slayer. But it feels like another instance of taking away choice from us as the player to.
I mean, they've even had these options in Halo 5. I don't know why they changed their whole play model when it comes to playlists.
Yeah, and in regards to the UI thing, which is something that Sketch had mentioned in his response to the whole playlist debacle, um the part that it and I feel like we're getting way to the negative, so we'll shift gears here in a second, but the part that really doesn't sit well with me in regards to that is they made it a point to emphasize that they developed a new engine, which wasn't entirely true. The Slip Space engine is just an overhaul of the Halo 5 engine. So it's not like they built a brand new engine from scratch. They've upgraded their existing engine, which I mean that's fair. Good for you. Um, but for them to invest, I think arguably it was like 2 years, something like that, into the engine alone to make it, presumably better than what it was, and then for them to turn around and say, hey, well, yeah, we have UI limitations and we can't. It's not as simple to add a playlist in. That doesn't.
Yeah, like they should have that foundation for the game already there. Either they were
Yeah,
never planning to add it, or they are literally lying through their teeth. It's only time will tell. I don't really exactly know what their thought process is on that. But it's definitely a little fishy in my mind. So we'll just see.
yeah, and to put on the tinfoil hat again, what and it's kind of like I of course I don't think this was Sketch's intention, but he kind of you know shed a little bit of light on something, whether he meant to or not. But if they're having issues adding playlists now, and again, particularly we'll talk about Slayer, that's already exists in the game. It's just lumped in with another playlist. And we had it during the flights. If they're having issues with that now, implementing a new separate playlist, at least to me, and I mean, people will draw their own conclusions, that tells me that they never had any intention of putting out these separate playlists for launch, at least. Like they never had, either they never had the forethought or they made the conscious decision to not have more than, the three, technically four if you count Bot Slayer, playlists at launch. At least the infrastructure set up to do it.
So I am gonna have to move on, but since we don't have a lot of time left and we're pushing an hour, I am going to just do a rapid fire session where I'm just gonna throw a bunch of topics out and you're just gonna answer them. First of all, the anti
Oh
cheat
God. Okay.
or lack of
Yeah. So
thereof.
you don't even have to give an introduction for that one. Yeah. So okay. So first of all, not having an anti-cheat is a very, I mean, naive way to go. I mean, obviously, people are going to try to cheat at the game if you give them the opportunity to. It's amazing to me that they didn't see this happening with Call of Duty and say it with as much of an issue as it's been in Call of Duty for them to say, hey, we should have some kind of anti-cheat in place. The flip side of that, and this I will admit that this is my bias as I play on PC with a controller. Them removing Red Reticle from PC players is absolutely dog shit, and I 100% advocate for that they either need to bring it back because for just a shorthand of it, without Red Reticle on PC, one, you can't determine a weapon's effective range. You just can't. There's no indicator. And two, I think that not having the Red Reticle is actually a contributing factor to why a lot of people are having an unpleasant experience with the aim. And it from a mechanical perspective, in the past, or it will, yeah, in the past, we'll put it this way. The way the aiming has always worked is red reticle was your visual indication that aim assist and bullet mag were in effect, right? So in Halo 3, we'll just pick that as an example. When your cursor's not red, your aim is completely 100% dependent on your raw input. Whatever you're doing to the stick, that's what's happening with your cursor. When your red reticle kicks in, whether you know it or not, your aim, the way the aiming mechanic is actually working is now different because it's also accounting for aim assist and bullet magnetism. So when you've spent years playing Halo 3 or Halo 2 or Halo 1, even Reach, you became used to knowing in your brain that when the reticle turns red, I need to adjust how I am aiming. Maybe that's smaller inputs, less dramatic turns, more stuff like that, less fine tuning because you have that aim assist in effect. Now, some people will argue that that's a crutch. That's fair. It can be argued as a crutch. Um, but without that visual indication in Infinite and not knowing what the effective range is, you have no indication in your brain to know when your aiming mechanic switches from raw input to raw input plus aim assist. So,
Yeah, I either overcompensate or undercompensate because I'm used to that
yes.
pull of the auto aim or push of the auto aim. And I also, just whenever I see red, like the red reticle pop up, it's just, instinct. I fire. I'm so used to that. It's so ingrained in how I play that it's just so hard to react now.
Yeah. I mean, they have EAC for MCC, but I think the excuse behind it, and I will say excuse because tinfoil hat off. I'm gonna go full send on this one. It's quite frankly, it's bullshit. The argument of we removed red reticle from PC to curb cheating does not hold water because
People have already
it
found
did
ways to start cheating.
it did nothing to stop cheating. It's still a rampant problem that people are
Three
seeing.
days after the launch, not the actual launch, but the pre-launch, whatever they want to call it, the beta, people were posting about, oh, here is a code that will allow you to cheat. Here's how to get through and gain, max XP. Like that is, it's such a problem, and they're doing nothing to stop it. Taking out the red reticle doesn't even solve half of the problems that they're
Yeah,
having. They're literally just taking the easy way out.
yeah. But then of course, I mean, and this is even made worse by the fact that there's no way to report players. And yes, you can report them through Halo support, but ask yourself how many people are actually going to put in the effort to close their game, open up a new tab, go to Halo support, fill out a ticket. It's just it's not worth the effort because for most people it's like, okay, the match is over. Hopefully I won't run into that guy again. So and it's ridiculous because I've seen clips where people they're clearly cheating, but then what they'll do is they'll just fire their gun into the floor to make their accuracy worse. So they can argue, oh, well, I'm not cheating. I'm just that good. And it's ridiculous. It's 100% ridiculous. My, well, really quick, my proposed solution, if 343 is listening, um, basically, if you want to die on that hill and say that red reticle is not necessary for PC, then remove it for consoles as well. And I don't mean to be unfair to the console people. I was a console person once. But it's not nice and it's not fair to have an inconsistent experience dependent on which device you're using to play the game.
Yeah, I mean, I have it both on PC and Xbox, and I have friends on Xbox and PC that I play it with, and that's just how it is. And I have to consistently switch back and forth between it and compensate not only for the aim assist, but now the red reticle, and it's just so much harder. And I still play with controller. It's not like I'm switching to a keyboard, and so the inconsistencies just ruin how I play. It takes like 3 or 4 games just to get into the feel again. And then great, yeah, now I have to
Yeah.
switch
And
to
it should have never been a
either the
problem in the
console or the
first place.
PC again. And it's so frustrating. So they should just, if they're going to do it, they should just take it out for everyone. Make it a fair playing field. But let's move on to radar and maps.
Yeah. So okay. So to quick fire on those. So the radar, also dog shit. I will say at least I am glad that they opted to, uh, given the flights they first tried to initiate that whole Halo 5 radar where it only picked up fast movement and shots, not walking, which of course everybody said no, it's awful, it doesn't work. So they made it behave like the classic radar, but very quickly people found out that it's still dog shit. It still doesn't pick up anything because the effective radius on the radar is not good. And for anybody who basically, okay, put it this way: if you haven't tested it yourself, you can. It's easy to do in custom games. Um, by the time your radar actually registers a person, they are on you.
You can kill someone with a bulldog. So they are technically and literally within shotgun range of you.
Yeah, and especially with given like if someone's coming up behind you, I mean, by the time you even pick them up on the radar, you are already pretty much dead. It's just it doesn't work. It's not effective. The elevation piece, well, and this one is a very from what I understand, a divisive topic. Some people like the elevation indicators in Reach. Some people didn't like them. I personally, yeah, I liked them, and I was happy that they made a return in Infinite. However, the execution is very poor. That the slightly brighter glow to determine if someone's on the same elevation as you, it's not good. I mean, it's insanely easy to miss, and basically in the heat of the moment, if you're trying to look at your radar, you actually have to pause in a second and think, okay, is that bright or is that not bright enough? I can't like you actually have to think about it rather
It's
than
practically useless
yeah.
because you don't have the reaction time to look and be like, oh, yeah, it's slightly brighter.
Yeah. So and for anybody out there who likes the current radar or doesn't like the radar in general, we'll say, that's what we have ranked for. We have ranked so it doesn't use a radar, and I agree that there should be more playlists that appeal to more things that different people like. But the radar as it is, they 100% need to up it to 24 meters, which if you go into custom games, you can set the radar uh, pickup range. If you set it to 90%, it'll read as 24 meters. It can only increase or decrease by 3 meters, which is interesting to me because that means that the radar that we have in the game in Slayer or in social is actually like 60% of whatever the default was
Yeah, like
when
it
it was
was already
coded.
there. They just had to
Yeah.
implement it and they just
So
didn't.
for some reason somebody said, "Well, what if we set the radar to 60%?" and that's what they shipped it with. So not very good. The next thing, moving on really quickly, the player acceleration. So this one I'm probably going to catch some hate for. I don't like it, and I will explain why and why I don't think it's a good choice.
Can I say something really quick?
Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on the fact that they were planning to have a larger radar for BTB, but I just that just is more inconsistencies that you have to get used to. Like you're going to be jumping back from a large radar to a smaller
Yeah.
radar.
Exactly. No, and you're right too because and that also kind of is a detriment to muscle memory. So a big thing of the older games is that you could go into customs and practice things. But when you're jumping from game mode to game mode or core mechanics behave differently in different game modes, it's really hard for you to develop that muscle memory because it's always changing what you're trying to practice. But yeah, so very good point. For the strafing acceleration, I will say before I actually explain it, for anyone who's curious, if you go into custom games and you set the strafing acceleration to 80%, that will give you the Halo 3 strafing. If you set it to 90%, that'll give you closer to like Halo 5. Um, but in the spirit of being fair, I will say I can understand why people didn't like Halo 3's acceleration strafing. It felt like sluggish at times. But to me, I like that, and I'll explain why. But I definitely think where it's at now, where you can instantly change direction, is not good.
Yeah, if we're going to be
And
talking
you're
about keyboard
essentially,
unfairness, I've literally seen people on keyboard just look like they're teleporting back and forth.
yeah, AD. Yeah. So here's the reasoning behind that. So ultimately, yes, the first point is that PC has a clear advantage. You spam AD. It's very hard, especially in close quarters, for controller players to be able to track that. Um, I, the bigger issue here, though, is I feel like this is another big contributing factor to why the aim doesn't feel great all the time. And the reason why is Halo was always, and the way I like to describe it, is a strategic shooter. So let me paint you a picture, right? So in Halo 3, just going to pick that one as an example. If you were in a gunfight, close mid with ARs, we'll say, and you and your opponent are strafing, as a player, as a strategic player, because Halo's always had a higher time to kill, which gives people more time to actually contemplate what they want to do in a gunfight. Rather than games like COD where it's pretty instant. It's like, okay, well, who has the better reaction? We'll describe that more as like a twitch shooter, right? And that's what people typically will say. It's a twitchy reactionary shooter, Call of Duty. So in Halo 3, when you're strafing, part of the strategy was if you're looking at your enemy and their movements, they're telegraphing what they're trying to do, right? So if you have someone strafing to your left and they start slowing down, in your mind, that's supposed to be your cue to say, hey, he's slowing down, he's about to change direction. So I need to anticipate that so I can stay on target, and I'm going to try to guess which direction he's going to switch. Maybe he's going to go to the right, maybe he's going to take a step back. I don't know yet. Whereas twitchy shooters, that strategic piece just doesn't exist. It all comes down to it's who has the better reaction. Exactly. So I will concede and say that I understand why a lot of people didn't like the Halo 3. As much as I would like it to be like Halo 3's, I will say I get it. But I do think that there is a sweet spot between the 90% setting in custom games and where we're currently at.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, like, I like Halo 3 multiplayer. I didn't get to play a lot of it when I was younger. Uh, but it does feel a little slow, but Halo Infinite is way too fast. Like, there is no player acceleration, and that makes it just very hard for a lot of people to be able to keep up with keyboard.
yeah, and again, as much as I like Halo 3, I get it, but the instant acceleration is just unpleasant. It's not fun to go against. It comes down to who has the better reaction or the faster twitch response. And it doesn't fit well with Halo's time to kill. Like with something like Call of Duty, it makes sense because you die pretty quickly. But with Halo, it's like you're in that gunfight for what feels like a couple of seconds, even though it's like one and a half, it is a couple seconds, really. It just depends who's hitting more shots. Um, but you can't, even though the engagement is taking longer than your typical fast-paced shooter, you don't have any options. Like you can't really read your opponent. You can't really think about, okay, well, what can I do? It doesn't work with it. And some people will say, hey, they're willing to make that sacrifice for it to feel more reaction or reactive. But I personally think there's got to be somewhere in between that we can make the players who want it to be really responsive, and the players who want it to be more be able to read their opponent's movements essentially.
Yeah, was there anything else you wanted to touch on before we move on to maps?
Yeah, player collision needs to be turned on. I don't care who you are. I don't care what you think. Player collision needs to be turned on.
The amount of
Um,
times I've had players walk straight through me and block like a sniper shot or a rocket
yeah,
and then
it's
I
bad.
die is ridiculous. I've also had teammates coordinate a switch where one person will walk through the other person when their shields are down, which you wouldn't be able to do that and I'd still get the kill, but now you can with no player collision.
Yeah, it's bad. It solved so and here's this is a perfect example. This is my favorite example I'll say, and I mentioned it earlier. This is a perfect example of taking a shortcut because the main issue behind player collision was that people didn't want to be griefed or they didn't want to have other people get in their way or ruin their experience. Totally fair. That some people are just assholes. They'll fucking kill you for a power weapon. They'll get in your way. They'll try to box you or push you off of a cliff, whatever. I don't think the solution here was to remove a core game function from everybody because of a few bad eggs.
Yeah, I mean,
I
and
think
that's
what this
why they should have left report in, but no,
yes,
they took it out, and now they have to be like, oh crap, we have to take out player collision because otherwise this system doesn't work.
it's the same thing with friendly fire. Instead of removing a core game function, why don't you just develop a competent booting and betrayal system? Like that way the people who are being negative can be punished and it doesn't affect everybody else who plays the game. And I would even take it a step further to say, why don't you implement a reputation system? So that way people who are assholes and consistently do shitty things to their teammates, they play with other assholes. So, they get to have their fun goofing around and fucking with each other. And the people who don't like that get to
And
play
for those
together.
of you thinking that it'd be way too complicated, it's not complicated as most people think.
Halo 3 had it.
Yeah, and moving on, is there any other topics that you feel
I
like you
got
want to
a
touch on?
few more ready, and we won't even explain them. So, friendly fire, because grenade spam is absolutely awful. It also ruins muscle memory because sometimes grenades hurt you because they're not your teammates, and sometimes they do because they are your teammates. A service record slash pre-game, post-game lobbies. They removed those social features for whatever reason. Halo's always been a social game. Also removing the general text chat to be able to speak to or any way of communicating with the other team. I don't know why that was a decision made. I can understand, oh well, it's because of toxic players, but then again, emphasizing player choice, give people the choice to mute players or disable chat, rather than strip a feature away from everybody.
Yeah, like Halo has always been a social game.
Yeah, and it's funny, and to put a real life example on it too. We were playing MCC 2 days ago, and we made a new friend.
Yeah,
Like
man, and he's totally awesome.
yeah. So he joined our Discord. He plays games with us now. It's like it was nice to have that, but you simply can't do that in Infinite because you're not allowed for some reason to communicate with the other team. And yeah, so to put the tinfoil hat on, one of the conspiracies I saw, which I think is funny, and if it is true, shame on 343, that they made it that way so that way people can't get into lobbies and communicate with the other team and say, hey, let's all work together to complete our challenges. I think that's hilarious. But yeah, so the service record, the stats, performance-based points experience for to really get people to actually try in the games and be rewarded for a good performance. Um, but that's everything I can think of off the top of my head.
You know, I do have to say that they look awesome and there's some really cool aspects about them. I just don't feel like the rotation of them or the spawning of them uh,
Yeah,
is laid out very well. I also just find the fact that some of the BTB maps, the spawn points for the flags, it just makes the game not fun and it just results in a stalemate for most. Oh, and speaking of spawning, just the other day I was playing and I spawned in front of a teammate that was getting shot at and died almost instantly.
yeah. My gripes with the maps are okay. I'll kind of separate it to the arena maps and the BTB maps. I do agree the maps look amazing. I don't think I honestly don't know if I've played as much of as you in arena because I just got tired of it very quickly. But I haven't noticed anything about the spawns. But what I will say is one thing I don't like are the rotating weapons. And some people do like them. It adds to variety. In my opinion, I don't like it because one of the things I always liked about the older games is that uh, whichever weapon spawned on that map kind of added to the identity of that map.
It
Like,
takes away from the whole strategy of Halo.
yeah,
I mean, it takes away
yeah,
callouts. You can't call out weapons anymore. It takes away the whole timing of weapon spawns and that whole strategy. It's always been a part of, hey, I need to rush this certain weapon with my team because we need a cap sniper, and because that's going to win us the game. So it completely ruins that whole aspect.
Yeah, and it just even if you were to say like if you were to go to someone who played Halo 3 for example and say, "Okay, well what is the map that has the gravity hammer bottom mid and sniper far bottom mid?" And
Yeah, that's Guardian.
yeah,
Like, I
exactly.
don't
Like
even play much Halo 3, and I know
it's
that.
its identity of map. So I don't like that, and I think that moving over to big team, again, the maps are beautiful. I will say that I don't like that there's no variety for big team. I feel they're all the same aesthetic essentially. A big team is not balanced. There are no equal starts in big team. One side will get BRs, one side will get commandos. That is not even. The commando pales in comparison to the BR. And the pit thing I want to emphasize, especially for big team, is that the vehicles are not good. The spawning system, while it looks so cool and I was really excited about it, it's not fair. The maps are not really designed for vehicle combat. There are too many tiny snaky paths off to the side, which basically you get in a tank, it's a death sentence. Um, but the spawning of the vehicles and the vehicle health overall, the balancing is just not there. I mean, Warthog, it feels like you're driving Styrofoam. It dies super fucking quick. And there have been countless clips. I mean, you guys know if you've seen them, of like the new spawn mechanic. It just doesn't work. I mean, one team will get a tank and the other team will get two ghosts, and it's like that's not fair. Or like a tank won't spawn to the last 20 seconds of a match. Like, what
I
are you gonna do
remember
with that?
playing a match in big team where there was like 2 minutes left, and the other team was really badly losing, um, and they got a tank, and we were stuck with a warthog. And like they want to talk about player fairness, that's not fair at all.
Yeah, and even outside of the inconsistent spawning or the unfair spawning, we'll say, I do like the mechanic. Don't get me wrong. I like the idea of a pelican coming to the battlefield, dropping it off. But another issue that this raises is you're essentially telegraphing vehicle spawns, which means either the enemy team is going to come and try to steal yours, which I mean would happen normally, but it's much easier because they're being told when it's coming. Um, but also it creates a very very weird part of the match because when a vehicle's coming and people look up and they're like, oh shit, it's a tank. Everybody in your fucking team is going to run to the same place, and it's like that shouldn't be happening. You shouldn't have everybody standing in one spot and then you're going to all fight over who gets the tank. So I think a better approach or a kind of a compromise would be, firstly, develop the maps to be more vehicle friendly and make the vehicles more balanced. Like the Banshee is absolute dog shit. Um, but have the maps have their static spawns. Like have this. We'll say fragmentation. It always has like it has a wasp. There's always the static wasp that spawns on it. I think do that, but for all of them. Like sometimes you have a one map has a tank as the spawns, one has a wraith. Valhalla is the prime example in my book. But you don't have to remove the pelican mechanic. Just have it drop off a randomized vehicle in the middle of the map for both teams. That way, you're still keeping that variety of like, oh, this vehicle's not usually on this map or something like that, and it's equidistant from both teams. So there's okay, well now both teams are going to come to this point and fight over. I think to transition into the positive stuff, there is a lot of potential here. That like there's and I think to be and to give 343 credit and to try to be fair to them, arguably they have never put out a complete game. And that sounds like I'm being mean to them, but that is the status quo. That is the pattern for them. So it's fair to say, yes, as people or perhaps fans of the older games who are so used to getting complete packages on day one for retail price, it is jarring to have a game that's so close to Halo. It tastes like Halo, but still have that weird 343 tradition of not being complete at launch. Um, that eventually I think that they do, as long as they play their cards right and they really do listen to the community and not take the community for granted, because I feel like at this time maybe they are a little bit by, radio silence. A couple of aspects of Sketch's post really kind of felt unprofessional. Um, but I think that they have the opportunity here to really make Infinite into something special, just like MCC was made into something special over time.
Like there are a lot of good things about Halo Infinite. I know we're talking a lot about the negatives, but that's just how it goes. People tend to focus on the negatives, but there's a lot of positive things, and everything negative we have talked about can easily be fixed
It can
through
be
just
fixed.
time and dedication. Most of these topics have been heavily discussed on the Halo forums, and they have a huge backing behind this. Some not, but a lot of these issues do. I just think that 343 should at least address some of these problems instead of blocking the forums and ignoring them because they just don't want to deal with it. They don't even have to fix them right away. They can just say, hey, we hear you, we understand, and give out kind of like updates on what their plans are. And with Sketch basically saying, hey, you guys either like it or leave, like I just feel that they're just forgetting who,
Yeah.
their players are.
Yeah, and I think that the first step, and this is arguably the hardest step, honestly, is them admitting that they were wrong in certain aspects. That's it. And you can pick out of the issues we've discussed, pick one out of a hat for them to come out and say, listen, we wanted to try something new, or we thought that this would work really well, but we understand it's not working how we envisioned. We accept that we tried it, it didn't work, we're going to fix it. They really seem to enjoy digging their heels in, even when, everybody is unified and just saying, nope, we don't hear you. That's what happened with Halo 5. I mean, it's again, considering the track record, they really have trouble, it seems, admitting when they are wrong and then taking steps. And to use a quick example, we'll look at the radar, right? Everybody and their mother said, listen, we want the classic radar. There was nothing wrong with it. Give that back to us. And instead of saying, hey, okay, you know what? We tried doing the fucking Halo 5 18-meter thing. You guys don't want it. You want the classic? Fine. Instead, they say, hey, well, we found a compromise. We figured we'll do this part, but we'll also keep this part. It's like they're so hell bent on having their some kind of their version involved when people are asking for it. Like, no, just give us what we've already had. No one asked you to change this. It's like
Yeah,
they
and like
insist
there's
on,
so many people that are not asking.
yeah,
There's like, yeah, we just put out a bunch of stuff, but there's people involved in it, like how you said, that just want to see the game improve. It was really all they gotta do is go in, change the sentiment, and just apply it to an update. That is how you improve a game. They're allowing, I'm not sure if it's pride, I'm not sure if it's too much flex on playing Catherine, but everyone knows if you come out and say, hey, we're sorry, we'll listen to you guys more. The community appreciates that even more. They're like, wow, thank you so much for doing that. That was brave of you to come out and do it like that, and we thank you.
yeah.
It's even better for the community.
I 100% agree. And I made a post about this. I think maybe the other day, but like, because with the praise that the campaign is getting, rightfully so, Joe Staten did a really good job.
Oh,
There are a bunch of things that are just quick wins that they could implement, like for instance the radar, the player collision, easy things that they can address to just show people like, hey, look, we do hear you. We are going to make these quick changes just to kind of give you what you're asking for, um, while they still work on these bigger issues. Because I don't think anybody. Okay, let me rephrase that because there's always going to be some asshole, but I don't think any realistic person is sitting here going, "Oh, they need to fix the progression right now." By that, even by them saying, hey, this increased XP is a band aid. We're working on a bigger system in the back. Like,
yeah, like
okay,
I was so
fine.
proud and
Yeah.
thankful for them to do that because that took a lot.
Yeah, but then at the same time, when you look at the Slayer, the playlist problem, it's like that didn't feel like, hey, okay, we fucked up, we didn't add these playlists. We're gonna work on it and get them in for you. Instead of saying, yeah, well, we didn't add them because of this reason and this reason, and like honestly, it's really hard to do. So, we're gonna probably try to get them next year, and it's like these all just feel like cop outs compared to admitting that you're wrong and
Like if they didn't want to put it in, that's fine. Just let us know. I know it would suck,
yeah.
but don't lie to us.
Oh, and a last point too, it crossed my mind on Big Team. Get rid of the scope glare on BRs and VKs. What is that about? And I don't like it on the snipers either, but I understand because we're trying to be more open to new players and to because not everybody's gonna fucking have that prior knowledge to be like, okay, someone sniping. Here are the hot sniper spots on this map. Um, I get it for snipers because you potentially could get one shot by a sniper, but there's no reason the BR or the VK has scope glare. It's an odd choice. I mean, I understand it's probably for accessibility, um, but no, I just don't think that those qualify as power weapons.
Speaking of accessibility on a positive note, they did a really, really good system for new players. Like, they had a strong tutorial, they allowed you to train with different weapons. Like, I really felt like they added some good tips even into the loading screens on what to do. Like, there was one that said, hey, if you want someone to get into your Warthog, slow down and honk.
Yeah, and I agree. I think the tutorial and the academy was a very, very good thing to onboard new players, and I do appreciate it. I went through it. I thought it was fun. I had a good time with it. One thing I will say that I don't enjoy, and this may be dated, it may have been corrected. I don't know. I haven't been in the academy since launch. Um, it's inconsistent with what actually happens in the game. So from what I understand, and again, this was a while ago, um, the red PC players have red reticle in the academy. That might not be the case anymore. And the weapon balancing was different between the academy and the actual multiplayer, which again, some people might not care. It's like whatever. I know how to use the gun. I don't care how many bullets it takes to kill. But for other people, having that
Yeah, like
inconsistency,
if you train an hour with
yeah,
that
it
weapon, it's
hurts.
gonna really throw you off in game.
Yeah, you get you in a perfect example. Right, there's your muscle memory again, right? And I will be the first to admit I'm one of those people who instinctively, and it's the worst habit, I will always reload after a kill. And it's just muscle memory, right? So but you get so and the reason you do that, if anyone else out there does it, the reason you do it is because you get so used to. When we use Halo 3 as my favorite example, you get so used to knowing exactly how many shots it kills. So sometimes it's like, yeah, this guy's gonna be dead in 4 shots. You do your 4 shots, you immediately reload, but like maybe you missed that last one, but it's too fucking late. You're already reloading. So yeah, so translate that into infinite. If you think it takes 3 shots to or we'll say 7 shots to kill with the M7, that's the pistol, right? The M7, I think so. Not the MK. That's what I was trying. Yeah, and you hit your 7 shots and you're like, yeah, okay, and then you go to reload, but it's actually in the multiplayer it's been rebalanced and it actually takes 7 shots. So I definitely think, and that's an easy fix too. I'm sure that they can patch that. They maybe already have. Honestly, I don't know. But
Overall,
yeah.
especially for the campaign, even though I haven't played all the way through it, I've been really enjoying it. It's leagues better than Halo 5. Some people liked Halo 5. I didn't like it. But I dare I say I like it even more than Halo 4. And if you watched my previous videos, I really liked Halo 4's story. I thought it was beautiful and people just didn't give it enough credit. So I really, really liked the story so far. I'm excited to play the rest of it, and I'll probably be finishing it within the next few days. I just want to, get all the audio logs, get 100%. I mean, a little. There are a few things that are tedious with the open world, but I feel like with every Halo, there's always been that one mission where you're like, oh my gosh, like I just feel like I'm doing the same thing over and over again. And again, that's just with every Halo, every video game. So I think they did a wonderful job implementing this new style of gaming that they've really never done with any other Halo. So I give them props on that. And even though there are some things in the multiplayer I'm not too fond of, like there's so much about it that I do like, and what there isn't, they can fix.
Well, yeah. So before I can close it up, but before I jump to the positive, one thing we didn't touch on was the friend or foe system, the outline. So really quick point on that. I I agree with everyone else. The fact that everybody glows in the dark essentially is kind of shitty. I don't like that. I think that they
Yeah,
fix
like I
that.
can literally snipe people from
Yeah,
across the map that are barely peeking around a corner. I just don't think it's
yeah,
fair.
and I'm sure they can tune that, and I really hope they do. But in regards to it being a thing, I like it. I like the fact that you can pick the colors because for people who do have accessibility issues, it's very helpful. But
Yeah, like especially if you pay a bunch of money for a skin, you want to be able to use it and not an only
yeah,
like
so
infection and free for
they
all.
they need to. I again, if they're hiring, I think what they need to do is tone down the glow and make it not so easy to see people from so far away, and not stand out so ugly in an ugly way from the environment. But also give us the option to turn it off because a lot of people have been saying, okay, we want the option to turn it off for enemies. I agree. We should have the option to turn it off for enemies. We should also have the option to turn it off for teammates. And I haven't
Yeah,
spoken to
like I
anybody
think
who
they should have
shares
a percentage option where you can like,
all the way,
have
right?
it where it currently is or dim it or even take
Yeah.
it off completely and put it at 0%. I just think that you shouldn't be able to see people from across the BTB map. That's it hinders the game. It takes away the whole strategy of trying to find people because you can already see them. It also just makes it impossible for
Yeah, I
people to
agree. And
hide.
I think it's insane too because like it's a good example of a mechanic with good intent even if you do make the argument it was solely for monetization. Um, but ultimately it does benefit people. So it has its place, but again, I think the real benefit that they have here is they should or they can rather give players choice. Because and for me personally, I never really relied on red versus blue. I always relied on service tag. So if anyone didn't have a service tag, that's who I was shooting. So I would like it to be like that for my experience. But for people who would like to have the colors or the outlines, I mean, we should have as much choice as
I
possible.
mean, from
I
day
think.
one, they were preaching accessibility to old players and new players, and they were also preaching for customization. Like, that's half of some of the videos that they posted were just about customization and what you can do with the settings, with armor customization, with all these
Yeah,
things. And I just think that
smoothing.
they should stick on that route. And, it wouldn't be that hard. All you have to do is just, throw in the option to mess with the percentages, which, as the
Yeah.
developers, they can already do, and it'd be super easy to just implement that and add that, and it just would be an easy fix.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of hope too, and I'll tie this into the campaign and the praise. Um, one hope that I have is, and again, I'm not going to spoil anything in the campaign, but given the way that the campaign went and the way it is set up or gotten them in the direction of going into a really good direction, rather. Um, my hope is that they use the open world mechanic because it is good. I mean, I was worried about that too. I still, at times I felt like there was nothing to do, but that's just me. I get bored easily sometimes. But what I really hope that they do is they take advantage of the open world mechanic in the sense of throughout the game's life, 10-year plan, they add different areas, act as DLC or expansions to the story, stuff like that. If they're going to continue the story and they're going to add additional content to further it, to further exploration of the ring, because I mean, realistically, the game takes place on a very small part of the ring. If they're going to add all of that, in my opinion, those expansions should be free. My reasoning for that is twofold. One, we paid $60 for a third of a Halo game at the end of the day. It was not a complete package. The multiplayer is already free. Presumably, we're getting Forge and co-op free. Um, but we paid full retail price for half a game. So I think it is fair to say that the story additions should be included in that base price. And the main reason for me is that given how aggressive the monetization has been and how in your face they are with okay we're okay with charging $20 for armor or we're okay with doing this for that um it would be incredibly insulting in my opinion for them to especially if they stand behind their monetization system and decide not to change anything and then have the audacity to turn around and say hey we're making a bunch of money off of you off of cosmetics but now we're also going to charge you money for additions to the story like I feel like they shouldn't be able to have both. If I'm paying fucking $20 for the color white, dude, you better give me some free DLC.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. Also, if you go into your map in the campaign, you can look around and see that it wouldn't be that hard to add onto the map. Um, they could just, slap some stuff in there and add it as DLC, or if they even want to do it where they create a completely new area, they could, and where you just use that dude, I don't know his name, it's Echo something, and he'll just transport you to
Yeah,
a
they
different part of
definitely
the
do.
ring.
It's just a matter of are they going to turn that into a cash grab mechanic or are they going to actually treat it as, fan service and give people those expansions to further explore the ring. To wrap it on the positive note, they have positioned themselves perfectly to do this. Based on what they've done, especially with the campaign, they have positioned themselves to really make themselves shine at the end of this by turning it around and really fixing the problems and adding to what's already great.
I mean, compared to other games, this is already a great, just like a wonderful game. It could just be so much more, especially as a Halo game. But if they want to take it that far, it could be one of the best games out there. And I think that's important to remember. And like they already have a great base for it. And if they want to do some tweaking, it could just be that much better. The potential is endless.
Yeah, and like you said, time will tell because and honestly, if they do listen to the fans and they do fix or they do right all of these wrongs, we'll say, I think this game easily can be just as good, if not even dare I say better than Halo 3 because of just what it has and where it can go. It has the potential. It really does. First thing, change the player acceleration, but then you know, um, they have the tools in front of them. They have the materials. They just have to get it right. And part of me wants to stay hopeful and say, I think that they will. But another part is privy to like how what goes on in 343 with like you mentioned earlier, the contractors, the Glassdoor reviews tell a lot, give a lot of insight of what happens behind the doors in 343. Um, so I think that it really takes, or what it's really going to take is a core group of people, and again, thankfully Joe Staten is there, and I think if anyone, he has the potential to do this. But to rally them, the employees, and to really drive their focus on what made Halo special in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, it does
So
have a lot of potential, and there's just they could basically take it anywhere they want it. It's a great game. Um, if they want to, they can make it so much more. But the base is already there, and there are aspects that I truly enjoy about the game. I think they're well on their way. I mean, they are leaps and bounds better than they have been in the past few
yeah,
years. With Halo 4, really good
yeah,
story, not so good multiplayer. Still fun though. With Halo 5, not so good story, good multiplayer, definitely fun. I think they found this Goldilocks zone though with Halo Infinite. They just need to tweak a few things, and oh my gosh, it's going to be beautiful. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me. It's not every day that I find someone that's more knowledgeable than me when it comes to Halo, so it's always a pleasure. And just thank you.
yeah. Absolutely, it was definitely a lot of fun. Thank you. I mean, obviously this wasn't a lore based episode, but if there's ever an opportunity to come on and to discuss maybe key areas
I
of the
can
lore,
spend all day talking
yeah.
about the
Oh,
Halo
all
lore.
day, all day. Yeah. If there's gonna be an episode 2, let me know.
Yeah, there'll definitely be a Halo lore episode. But thank you guys so much for watching. I know it was pretty negative, but that's just, usually what things revolve around. There is a lot of positive about the games, remember that. But if you have any questions or comments, you could feel free to, put it down below and I'll try to get back to you. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. Later.